If you don't have an overlock machine and are wondering how am I going to be able to finish my raw edges, because you do need to do something to stop them from fraying. So essentially, overlock machine is really good if you want to create a very strong overlock edge. That overlock edge seam will prevent it from fraying, which is very good, but there are so many different ways that you can do it without buying one. So today I'm going to show you a few of them. And this video will be particularly helpful for those of you who are wondering, do I need an overlock machine? Maybe you've been sewing for a few months, or you just got into sewing, you just bought your first sewing machine, and you might not want to spend extra money on another one. By the way, I'm Sarah, I'm a pattern maker, and I also teach you how to sew. So if you're interested in those topics, then definitely subscribe and follow anywhere you can. Without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, so the first method is the easiest one. You don't even need your sewing machine for it, but what you need is pinking shears, like these ones. What they do, they cut the raw edge on a zigzag, and that essentially minimizes fraying. I'm going to explain this more in a second. So if the fabric you're using is lightweight and crisp, you can trim two edges at once before pressing the seam open. So make sure that you don't press the seam open yet. A little tip from me, when you're using pinking shears, make sure that you don't open them fully when you're trimming the raw edge. It essentially will provide the best result. This method in itself will delay fraying, but it will not prevent it. So it is recommended to use it in garments that won't be worn as often. In a second, I'll give you more ways to finish the raw edge, but you always have to take into consideration how much the fabric is prone to fraying. So if you decide to use pinking shears, I would recommend to use it on fabric that doesn't fray or frays just a little bit. But let's say you really want to use pinking shears in your garment, you really want that pinked look, but you're afraid that your fabric, your raw edge will fray too much. Well, there is a way to make that edge stronger, and I'm going to show it to you right now. You have to place a line of stitching about 6 millimeters from the edge of seam allowance. Change your stitch length to a lower number and begin stitching. This is how it's going to look like. Then just pink the edge and be careful not to cut through the stitch. In general, I would recommend that you use this method, both of those methods, on garments that won't be worn much. I would actually recommend that you use it with fabric that is more lightweight. It's not going to work for jeans, it's not going to work for like a medium to heavyweight. I just would not do that. And personally, sometimes I use pinking shears when I decide to line my garments. The lining, I just quickly finish raw edges with this, just because I don't have time to do it differently and I know everything will be lined anyways. So sometimes I just use pinking shears as well. But again, it's up to you. It's a pretty good accessory to have. The most popular seam finish to use if you don't have an overlock machine is zigzag stitch. Very popular. This method has been used for generations. My grandma would always finish her raw edges with zigzag stitch. Same with my mom. In the past, I don't even know if overlock machines were available, so they would always use zigzag stitch, and it's a really effective way. So I'm going to show you how to do it. First, you need to change your straight stitch to zigzag. Number 3 on my machine. I like short length stitches, so 1.5 is great, and width is 3.5. I like to start stitching about 6 millimeters from the raw edge, and I know a lot of books teach you to start right on the edge. I personally am not a big fan of it, and I'm going to tell you in a second why. Now you just have to trim close to that zigzag stitch. Just be careful not to cut through it. Now I'm going to show you why I personally don't like using zigzag stitch right on the edge. If you decide to do it, I recommend starting about ½ centimeter from the top, because you don't want your sewing machine to swallow your fabric. In my personal opinion, this is just a little bit harder to sew, and oftentimes fabric curls under and create like a tunnel. It doesn't look good. I don't like that look. And I know there are different ways that you could try to adjust it, but I personally think it takes longer than just doing it the way I showed you previously. So this is how I would recommend you do it. But again, you do whatever you decide to do. Personally, I don't really use zigzag as much because I have an overlock machine. But for those of you who like to use zigzag stitch, I do think sewing it 6 millimeters from the raw edge and then trimming is just way easier. But yeah, let me know what you think. Maybe you have some tips and you love using zigzag. You're like a pro at zigzag stitch. If you have any tips, definitely leave them in the comments below. To summarize, this is a very good way to finish your raw edges. You can also use it on knits, which is awesome. I do think overlock machine is way better for knits, but you can use zigzag if you don't have an overlock machine and you want to just try to work with knits. You definitely can use zigzag. I've done that in the past. So it's doable. And also, zigzag works for different weights of fabric. So you can use it on jeans, you can use it on lightweight fabric. You just have to obviously change the needle and thread, but it will definitely work, so give it a go. And that is why zigzag is so popular. Okay, so this other method that I'm about to show you is called clean finished, and it is used on lightweight to medium weight fabric, and you can see it on unlined jackets. So if you decide to, let's say you don't want to use lining, then you can definitely use this method. It looks really good inside and really clean. Like the name says, clean finished. All right, I'm going to show you how to do it. What you have to do is turn the edge of seam allowance under, I'd say about 6 millimeters from the raw edge, and press it. If you want to be able to fold the raw edge a little bit easier, you just need to sew a straight stitch in the fold line, and then it will help to fold that edge under. Just change the stitch length to 4 and sew a straight stitch 6 millimeters from the raw edge. Do not backstitch. This is going to make it really easy to fold that raw edge, but it's just a little bit more time consuming. And then just sew a straight stitch along the edge of fold. Don't forget to remove that stitch we made earlier. Like I said, this technique is very good to use on unlined jackets, but let's say you want something a little bit stronger, a little bit sturdier. Well, let me introduce you to bias bound seam finish. So obviously the main thing that you will need to make this seam finish is bias tape, and I'm going to show you later how to make your own. So essentially you have to wrap bias tape around the raw edge and pin it in place if you like. Then stitch close to the edge of fold, catching both top and bottom one. And again, this is quite time consuming, but it looks really, really good. And I would recommend to use it on medium to heavy weight fabric. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to make your own bias tape if you need one. So first thing that you gotta do is cut strips of fabric on the bias, which is essentially 45-degree angle from the grain line. Then you have to place strips of fabric right sides together and pin it from corner to corner. And you also are going to sew from corner to corner. Then sew a straight stitch. Take it to the ironing board and iron on the left side. And then iron on the right side. Trim the seam allowance, and your bias tape is almost ready. Now you just have to pull the strip of fabric through bias tape maker and just press it with your iron. Then you have to close your bias tape and press it one more time. And your bias tape is ready. It's that simple. All right, now I'm going to show you my favorite seam finish, and it is a little bit different than the previous ones I showed you because this one is self-enclosed. So all of the previous ones were open, like this one, for instance. You can see that it is open, and the one that I'm about to show you is fully closed. And the seam that I'm talking about is French seam. It's definitely going to become one of your favorites. It's very time consuming, but it's beautiful. It looks very luxurious, and French seam is used on garments that are see-through. It's appropriate for seams that will be visible. So if you're using sheer fabric, like in shirts, skirts, dresses, even if you have lining underneath, but the main layer is sheer, it looks really beautiful when the seams are finished with a French seam. I'm going to show you in a second how to sew this one. And like I said, it is my favorite and I actually use it quite often. I would say sometimes even more often than I use this. So just FYI. All right, so to make it, place wrong sides of fabric together and stitch about 1 centimeter from the raw edge. And then trim the seam allowance, leaving about 3 millimeters. Then press the seam open. Fold right sides together with stitch line exactly on the edge of fold and press. Start stitching about 6 millimeters from the fold line. And then just press seam to one side and it is ready. And that's it. This one was not as hard to do. This seam is very, very strong. So if you plan to wash your garment a lot, this is the answer. I personally would use it mostly on lightweight fabric or on sheer fabric. It is very popular on silk. So if you buy a bias cut silk dress, you will definitely see French seam. Maybe not in fast fashion stores always, but in all the other stores, you'll definitely see French seam. But we just got to the end of the video, and I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments below what you want to see. I'm currently working on some sewing patterns, but they always take a few months to develop, test, all that kind of stuff. So it might be from 3 to 6 months for some of the patterns to be released. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Sorry for a month break. I was out of the country for almost a month, but now I'm back. So I'll see you guys in the next video next Friday. Bye bye.